All right, guys, welcome to today's podcast episode. It's Danny Ghitis with us. He's a creative coach who I've connected with, who I've had the pleasure of having on this podcast episode. Interested in giving you guys a backstory on his creative side and what he's been doing, and to just jump into how he got into where he's at now. So welcome, Danny. I know we were just having a little bit of technical difficulties, but that's what creatives deal with.
Indeed.
And persevere.
Part of the process.
Right. So here we are. We have Danny. So welcome. If you want to give us
Thank you.
So yeah, we spoke earlier. We spoke briefly. You said you were a freelancer for the New York Times. And then you said afterwards you're now a creative coach, which is pretty awesome. So do you want to give us a backstory on how you began with freelancing photography?
Sure. So, well, thanks for having me, first of all. Appreciate it. And so my journey started in college, essentially, with photography, kind of later in college. After moving around different majors at University of Florida and studying architecture and then an engineering program and even pre-med, and eventually I landed in photography, really journalism, because I was interested in storytelling and really seeking out truth and understanding people. And so I did that. I graduated with a major in journalism and decided to continue on that path after college. I got some internships at newspapers, which is really where my training was. It was sort of in like newspaper photography. I thought I was going to be a staff photographer at a newspaper. Did a couple of newspaper internships, and interestingly, the second newspaper that I worked at in Florida, it was a pretty good newspaper. They closed the bureau where I was working, and they had to move me to another satellite bureau. And it was a real shock because I learned pretty early on, but not early enough, that the news photography world was rapidly changing. The iPhone came out after I graduated, and with it, all of these advances in technology that have really shifted the media landscape. So after my internships, I traveled a bit. I went to India. I was in India for like 6 months. I considered working as a foreign correspondent type of thing. And but I wanted to learn more about the business of freelancing, because I understood that was really the inevitable direction of my career as a photographer. So I moved to New York because that's where everybody is. That's where all of the major publications are located, and that's where you make contacts and can learn about the business. Ended up staying in New York for a long time, and eventually started working for the New York Times through sheer force of will and repeated attempts at getting noticed by them. Did that for about 7 years, freelancing for them for different sections in the paper, covering all kinds of stories, meeting interesting people, and expanding my portfolio. And then that helped me get publications to pay attention to me and hire me for gigs, as well as some kind of corporate clients. And that was essentially my photography career until it wasn't anymore, until I decided that wasn't working for me any longer. And, I'm happy to talk about that as well, but I'll leave it to you.
Yeah. So, it's definitely a really interesting story. I was just excited. That was the premise of the show, just seeing how people are creatively impacting. And it's crazy that how you were bringing up the iPhone, how it's such a powerful tool now, and just all the things that it can do, and it's a really awesome backstory. So, but like you were saying, I'll bring this more, I guess, into what you're currently doing now with creative coaching. And then you said you were opening up that door, or I mean, the door is open. I was going through your social media. It was definitely engaging for me. I was hooked on it, just going through it and just getting into it. So you've opened up creative coaching. If you wanted to start opening up on that and expanding on that, I'd definitely love to hear more about that.
Sure. Well, I've always been a student of psychology going back to high school. I remember in high school, I took this college course that they let you, when you were a senior, you could take courses at the community college. And I took this social psychology course, which was fascinating to me because I was always interested in studying people, mainly because I found my own background kind of confusing. I'm an immigrant from Colombia, and my parents and my grandparents are immigrants from Europe. My grandparents are, excuse me, and it's just a complex cultural identity. And I moved around a lot growing up, so I was always trying to adapt and understand people. So anyway, that was part of the ingredients of being interested in human nature and observing others and seeing the social dynamics play out. Um, and I brought that into my work as a journalist, as a photojournalist, and a lot of the personal projects I did, as well as the assignment work. I mean, that was part of the way that I saw the world. But ultimately, as a photographer, I felt that I wasn't making the impact and experiencing the world the way that I wanted to. It was the freelance photography, at least in photojournalism, there was a very limited amount of feedback, not much interaction with the people that were responsible for putting out the news. And it's because of the changing industry. Things are just moving so rapidly. Um, Networking was essentially the key component of a successful business in freelance photography, and there weren't many staff jobs available. I mean, they're fading away pretty quickly. I knew people who got the jobs and then got fired. It wasn't a very solid ground. I wouldn't say fired, I mean laid off, because budget cuts. And the way that I was interacting with the world, with people, with subjects, felt very superficial as well. So I would go in and meet somebody quickly, build a relationship in 30 seconds, and then that would be it. I mean, it was very transactional. The relationships that I had and the impact I felt was difficult to measure as well. Something would go out into the paper and I wouldn't know if it helped anybody, if it, made any sort of difference. Presumably, journalism is this very noble pursuit that is good for the world. And of course it is. But from the individual's perspective, at least from my perspective, there was no kind of human aspect of, human experience of that. It was a digital transaction. You take the pictures, you upload them. Very often, the assignments would not get feedback. So it was every once in a while they say, okay, good job, kind of attaboy. And you'd know if you did a good job if you got another assignment, but not very much of a conversation. And so it was a lot of effort to create the work, and the pay wasn't very good, and the impact was hard to measure, or maybe arguably minimal, especially with some of the kind of stories that involved high society type of people. So it was a lot of coverage of celebrities and rich people and occasionally I would work on stories that maybe had some more social significance. Um, but I think a lot of it was, sort of society, culture type stuff. And that didn't feel substantive to me, I mean, I got into the work because I wanted to make some sort of impact. I had this kind of naive notion that maybe a heroic complex or something, but you go into college, you're like, yeah, I want to make a difference in the world. But that became increasingly difficult, and I wasn't satisfied. That and sustaining the energy to get work in that business can lead to burnout. And I think I was burned out at least once. It's a really tough grind. You have to be hustling at all times, and you're only as good as your last assignment. And there's a lot of nepotism. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff about the photography industry that wasn't suited for my personality, for my interests, for my goals. And in the back of my mind, I mean, I've always thought of myself as like a street psychologist. I mean, we are all street psychologists, really, little, like doing little experiments, but it was something I read about, and I was like actively interested in, studying anthropology, sociology. And I thought, well, what if I looked into that further? I'd also had therapists and coaches and stuff, and I had a positive experience with that. So I thought, well, maybe I can go back to school and just kind of explore this. I was still working as a photographer when I went back to school. I went to a program at NYU for coaching. And well, I should back up. I mean, before I even did the NYU coaching program, I applied to social work schools, to learn to be a therapist. And then after that, there'd be years of training, but to get licensed. But I was more interested in learning about, not from a clinical perspective, and more so from the, what makes people tick and what makes them succeed. What's the difference between flourishing and languishing, and how do you help people succeed in their lives? Not from a financial perspective, but from success as defined by the individual. And, therapy is focused. It's more of a clinical practice, right? You take insurance. They have, they're not doctors. They're helping people heal. And so I found coaching to be a way to practice that. There would be a way of helping people and connecting with people that wasn't about the clinical practice, but it still allowed me to study psychology. So I went to this, I got into this program and learned a lot about myself and the thought process behind creativity and motivation and productivity, and a lot of the sort of subcategories of positive psychology. And I just became so fascinated by it that I thought, wow, I can do this full time. This can be my job. And I kind of transitioned gradually from photography into coaching. The reason it's creative professionals coaching is because, hey, that's my background, and I have, an idea of what it's like to work in that field, in those fields, not just in photography, but having experienced the world of freelance and publications, media, it made sense. The people that were attracted to me as a coach have been typically creative professionals. We speak the same language. But I've also worked with people outside of that. I mean, I worked with accountants and lawyers and, all kinds of stuff, because ultimately coaching is not about the content. It's about creating a process that helps people figure things out for themselves. And that kind of leaves me where I'm at right now. I mean, there's big jumps and leaps in there, but I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like so like for myself, I was doing some freelance graphic design, and like you said, you're only as good as like the last project you're you're kind of putting out. So in a way, it kind of creates a lot of pressure. But you know, like I was going through your social media feed, and like a lot of the stuff, like I've done some like self-studying, like with psychology, studying up like just like what is happiness, you know, like overall happiness. And a lot of things they talk about is just like working on hobbies, you know. And I've always kind of preached to a certain extent to people, saying like, hey, you should be finding that hobby and, you know, put some actual time on it throughout the week, and it overall will help your mood, you know. And it's just it's kind of interesting just like listening to you at, like from a photographer's standpoint, and like hearing how much of it was relating to, like how much of it I was relating to as like somebody who does a lot of graphic design. Like that was kind of my my shtick for a little bit. I was on a Clubhouse. I'm not sure if you're on that app actually, but I was doing like a lot of these like, yeah, I was making a lot of these like profile pictures for people. And then I just got like overwhelmed with like making profile pictures. And it was like absurd to me how many of these I was making, and like the people I was meeting just for making these, like, I thought they were silly, but I was like, all right, whatever. Like before I knew it, like in a couple months time frame, I was connected to like Carol Baskin, Dane Cook, all these like big creators just through making these silly pictures, in my opinion. But it was just crazy. But like you were saying, like how much of a grind it can be. But that was kind of like my cue to, I guess, take a step back and kind of reassess everything. And you know, I've purchased podcasting equipment, and it's just always something I love to like build with and just see what I can do with it. And I mean, I was on Clubhouse just kind of building my podcast on Clubhouse, and then, you know, I just started randomly making these profile pictures, and like you were talking about with doing like little tests on people's psychology to see how they react to certain things. So that was a certain like test I just kind of made up, where I was just like, hey, I'll make these random profile pictures for people, go DM it into people's inboxes, and just to see what the reaction is. And it just like kept blowing up. And
did you get paid for it?
yeah, I made quite a bit. It was like 10 grand in like a month's time. So I was like, yeah, so I was like, all right, it was really wild. But like I said, it like, you know, I have a full-time job right now. So it's kind of like, I can't just like blow it all off. And it got me to a point where like, I just had anxiety from it. 'Cause I was like getting DMs from people, emails from people like, hey, where's my profile picture? And I was like sitting there, like thinking in my head, I'm like, man, I'm like, I don't know, just kind of drove me crazy, like I said. But it was it was a really cool experience. You know, I'm not gonna complain about it. Like I said, building the connections and stuff was really cool. But I just took like a step back and just started looking at everything, just trying to figure out what it was that made me happy as like a creative. And I think that's really important. Like you said, I don't think success is necessarily determined by how much money you're making. You know, it's I think it's personal internal fulfillment. And I do a lot of meditation. I think it's like a key to staying creative. And like when I was making these profile pictures, like, you know, a lot of people were asking like, hey, are you making money and all this other stuff? But like the biggest issue that I was having when I was making graphic design was like, I wasn't getting any like internal fulfillment after a while, just because I was doing so many of them. And just like getting back into podcasting, like I was thinking about it, and I was like, really, money and all this other stuff is just like a byproduct. You know, it's like when you're putting in that work and focusing on the process of building, and you're kind of just in that workflow of that happiness flow of just building. I think it pays off. You know, it'll take care of itself. All that other stuff will take care of itself when you're taking care of a lot of these internal factors. So yeah, like I was saying, like I follow a lot of rituals, sort of like I'll do a lot of meditating, just certain things just to get my brain flowing into that creative flow. So it's definitely helped quite a bit. So, I mean, I was going to ask you that, like, as far as like whatever you're doing, like for like getting into like a creative flow, if you're just like, okay, like I need my brain to kind of dance around a little bit. Like, is there any like sort of rituals that you'll follow to get that process flowing?
Yeah, I mean, and it's really hard to disconnect these days. So whether it's meditation or anything else, I think the key to that is to disconnect. And there's the first stage of disconnecting, which is the technology that's in your hand or in front of your face and all around you, you know. And you can go meditate, but if your phone's next to you, it can be pinging you and sending you notifications. So um, what I like to do is go walk. I have a dog, and I live by a park. And whenever I'm sort of spinning my wheels, I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna disconnect from this, leave everything at home, and go for a walk. Um, and that helps me. It's kind of a meditation. I mean, there's nature. There's a lot of research out there about the impact of being in nature and of um, self-reflection, but there's it's not all equal, right? I mean, what works for one person is not going to work for another person. You have to find what makes sense for you. um, some people are kind of averse to meditation, and that's okay. I don't think there's a one size fits all solution, but I think the disconnecting is a big part, especially these days. I mean, I think the source of a lot of anxiety comes from the constant attention that is pulled away from you. So focusing your attention is like it's the most valuable resource we have right now. Um, Time is so relative. I mean, you can spend an hour scrolling on TikTok, and what did you accomplish in that hour, as opposed to an hour where you're highly focused, which can make a huge impact in your life. I mean, um, you can come up with new ideas, you can execute on a project, you can make a bunch of money, you can, um, feel more connected to other people, whatever it is. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm not a big meditator, to be honest. I've done it a few times, and I really like it when I do it, but it's not something I'm drawn to intrinsically. My wife is into it sometimes, every once in a while it's nice. But I find that I can do something that's akin to meditation in other ways. Just trying to be mindful. If I just disconnect and I go somewhere that's not in my house, not my work, I really like the walking. And there's a benefit to moving your body as well. It produces uh, endorphins and BDNF and all kinds of hormones that make you feel good. And I think I made a video about this recently. There's a study out of Stanford that showed that they compared, they put subjects against a blank wall, and some of them were sitting, some of them were on a treadmill walking, and they had to do these divergent thinking tests. Divergent thinking is like what you think of as creativity, and connecting dots, thinking of new ideas, type of thing. And the people who were walking did 60% better on the divergent thinking test than the people who were sitting still. So now there's like these walking treadmills, the desk treadmills, where there's like this optimal kind of pacing. I forget what the average like miles per hour is, like 2 miles per hour or something. It's kind of like when you're on the phone and you're pacing back and forth. Something about that like helps you think better. It's some similar concept. Um, so moving your body and disconnecting from technology, and allowing yourself to feel your body, and that can be very liberating. There's an aspect of ruminating that can happen as well. So not all thinking is equal either. Just because you disconnected for 5 minutes, it might not be. So I think you have to be pretty active in your in your letting go. Also, taking a shower, I think, is huge. I think that the shower is like one of my favorite places to like expand my thinking, because you can't do anything other than be in the shower, you know. The water is warm and you feel that you're not really conscious of any other sensations that are like distracting you. It drowns out the sound too, you know, so you're sort of in a sensory deprivation kind of thing. It feels good, you know, it produces good feeling hormones. You're standing, you know, I mean, that's better than sitting. And you're just there, and all you can do is think. I know there's some actors who take multiple showers a day. Who was there's a director, screenwriter. Oh God, I forget who was it. P.T. Anderson maybe, that said or what's his name? I don't know. That takes like 5 showers a day. I think The Rock does also. What's his name? Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so just a couple of ideas there.
Yeah. No, it's definitely like a lot of good points you're making on all of this. Just getting the creative juices flowing. Like, I agree with you. It's you don't necessarily have to just meditate. I mean, there's, like you said, going for a walk, getting out, and just disconnecting from these cellular devices that are, I don't know, I've started calling them brain sucking devices to a certain extent. And you know, like you were also mentioning, when you're scrolling through TikTok, it's just like, man, like after an hour, it's like, what did I do with my time? And it gets even worse too. You know, there's like mobile gaming now, like, you know, they've got these like crazy video games that have just, I don't know, it's just crazy. And it's just like trying to figure out how to use your time efficiently. And I mean,
it reminds me of those you know, those like aliens from the movie Aliens that
yeah.
attack your face and like glue themselves to your face.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking like, I don't know if you've ever seen the Futurama episode where they got like all these like brains or whatever that come and like invade the earth or whatever, and it makes everybody like brain dead. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like,
what it is.
yeah, it's just wild. But like, I mean, just, I mean, even if things were running just like as they were now, you know, like without, you know, your cell phone kind of always there. I mean, it's kind of easy to get distracted, but then, you know, you've got this super distraction device that just can pull you away from everything. And, you know, you could spend it easily all day. Like you could wake up in the morning, be on your phone until you go to sleep, basically just scrolling through content. I think they said like every breath you take, there's like 8 hours of content uploaded to YouTube. And I was watching some other videos that were talking about how like the human brain is or our attention span is decreasing, and they're talking about how the average goldfish attention span is around 8 seconds, and for the human it's like decreased to like 7 seconds. So it's just
Yeah, I mean, I think it's dangerous, and the more we learn about it, the more we're seeing how bad it is. I think that, you know, 20 years in the future, I think we're going to look back at this and say, "What? How could we have been so stupid?" Unless it's so effective that we never actually make a change, and this is just who we are now. But I think with that Facebook whistleblower, we learned a little bit more about the nature of the businesses that run these things and the intention they have to suck our attention, and to not just, it's not like a neutral taking of our attention. It is actively, you know, stimulating our anger and our amygdalas. You know, it's preying on those visceral reactions that we have, and that's how they make more money. Which reminds me of what the tobacco companies did. You know, they use a chemical to keep you addicted, knowing that it's bad for you, but they don't care because they're making hand over fist. And yeah, I mean, I think the more that I come to terms with this, the more I see that, you know, this is crucial to manage in our lives. And we don't have that many tools I mean, there's apps and there's things that are built into the technology, but I feel like there's going to be more and more structural, governmental, societal tools to help us disconnect from these devices, or maybe the technology itself will evolve so that it somehow is more manageable, particularly for kids. I mean, God, I mean, I didn't grow up with any of this technology, and I can only imagine, I mean, as an adult, how badly it's affecting me. If you were this fragile, smushy brain that isn't fully developed, and that's how it's coming up, it's like doing drugs when you're little. So
Yeah, I see these
I think it's a bigger deal than we recognize on a daily basis.
Yeah, I see these like 5-year-olds running around with these TikTok t-shirts on, and I'm like, I don't think in like our generation, I'm like, I don't think they realize how much of like a hold like TikTok is going to have on this generation coming up. It seems like every generation's kind of transitioning from like one social media platform to the next one, but I don't know. It's just such a crazy landscape. Like even 20 years ago, it was a whole different game where everybody just had flip phones to like now everybody's just scrolling, and it was just like you were bringing up how Facebook is putting all this money into like holding people's attention, and it kind of seems like that's like the economy that we're in, where whatever means necessary, just to get people's attention. I know I was mentioning Clubhouse before, but I mean, that can totally suck out your attention. It's basically like a social audio app. So instead of scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, like you'll go into these rooms and you'll just sit there and talk to people, and certain, they'll have influencers that'll come in there. Like Jake Paul has been on there, Floyd Mayweather, all these like big influencers, but you'll just sit there and have conversations for hours on end. Like, there's no end. Like they're never like, oh, we're done. Like, it's just, you can just talk for however long you want. And, there's just a lot of like, an addicting aspect to it. And, I'm sure you've noticed, but there's Twitter Space that's came out. Facebook's trying to launch or trying to get their, social audio game rolling, and it's just been like crazy. And I'm sitting back thinking, I'm like, TikTok's going to be the next one that comes out with like a social audio app to keep their hold on this younger generation. But it's just wild. And like you said, like thinking of ways like of how do you actually manage your addiction. Something for me that I found was actually useful, like so if I'm going to go on an app like Clubhouse, like I want to actually make sure I'm using it effectively. So like when I make my to-do list before I go to sleep, I've just been writing like effectively network on Clubhouse. So if I feel like I'm just going into a room and just listening to drama, because it's a lot of the same thing with like Facebook, with like, people are trying to use trigger words, like just create drama and keep people hooked into it for hours. So if I feel like I'm at a point where I'm not effectively like using this social audio or social media, I'm just like, all right, I got other stuff to do. And
yeah,
I mean, even just with like getting this whole podcasting stuff all set up. I mean, I was going through sound checks last night. I was trying to make sure everything was so good to go. And then I was still running into issues. And, I was just like sitting there thinking in my head, I was like, man, if I were doing anything else besides going over, doing all these sound checks and making sure everything was good to go, like it, I would have faced issues. But, and the other point I wanted to make was, we've got these people who are engaging these people's brains. They're investing all this money to keep people locked on to social media, and the level of education that these people have that are working in social media with like psychology degrees, like PhD psychology degrees that are,
they're expert manipulators.
Exactly. And it's wild.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah. And,
sorry.
ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I'm sure you've seen the Social Dilemma documentary. It was on Netflix. Pretty good.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And bringing it back to the creatives, realm, this is one of the biggest problems I see all the time, with clients, that they're having trouble focusing and getting things done, or feeling bad about themselves and comparing to others, and a lot of sort of self-esteem issues, and focusing, productivity. A lot of these can be traced to the technology culture that we're in. Humans have always had issues with self-esteem, confidence, and believing in themselves and following through. And I mean, these are universal concepts, but a lot of the flavor of that shows up as getting distracted by YouTube, and why am I not as good as these other people that I see everywhere around me? And the high level of pressure around producing content constantly, and needing to put on a face that doesn't feel like yourself. And look, I mean, I struggle with this just as much, completely. Just because I help people work with that, that doesn't mean that I'm not impacted by it as well, and the way that a lot of people succeed now is through that method. So there's also certain personality types that lend themselves more to this type of thing. If you're really extroverted, you love to be in the spotlight, you love to talk, you love to connect, it can be more appealing to you, it can give you energy. If not, then it can be very draining. If you're already in a vulnerable state, if you are already questioning the direction of your career, of your creative work, it can suck you into that hole, into that rabbit hole of self-doubt and of ruminating and comparison and of feeling like you're not good enough. So it's a real catalyst for, it can be a disaster. Of course, there's a lot of things that are positive about it, but to me, it feels more important to focus on what's not working and how to change it when it comes to social media, because the benefits are sort of part of the narrative constantly. Like, we know what the benefits are. We don't need to think about, they're obvious. They're in our face all day long. Every time you go on there and everybody's talking about how they've made money and how they've become this and that. And so I don't want to sound like a overly negative, pessimistic person, but if we want to help people and correct some of these problems, for lack of a better word, it is important to point them out and to say, these things aren't working, and make sure you're aware of the fact that this device it can be a big source of those issues. And without it, you might be able to sleep better. And so on. Your relationships might improve.
Yeah, it is really interesting too, like, to think about how you're pointing out. We know the benefits, but having it cut out when you need it, but it's kind of like at this point it's become almost a necessity with like staying connected to people. But I was almost thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, I wonder how things would work out if I just ran like a test of just running around with like a flip phone. Again, just get one of those old cheap like phones that just, or even like one of those old Nokia bricks, just testing out, just if you need to contact me, just reach me on this. But it feels like nowadays, like it's become such a necessity where like people deal with their connections on there, making online transactions and all of that. It's like all done through social media. But
yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's possible to survive without it in this day and age. If you work for a company that has certain requirements where you need the device, then I don't know, there may be ways to kind of wall it off for specific use. But in the creative fields, I don't know if it's possible to work without that. I mean, maybe you can set yourself up for some storefront where you produce a particular craft and you are very visible in a community somehow, so that that's how you network. And I know that there are professionals who still do that out there. I don't know, the chiropractor around the street from me, he's got a he's been doing it for a long time though. So he already has his network. He already has the patients, people who know where he is. And I just don't know if that's possible in this. So it's more important to manage the way it's used. You know, we can't really throw the tool out completely. It's just not realistic for most people, you know, and we
Right.
can't go and be monks, but the way you manage it can be both external and internal. You know, you can manage it with physical boundaries in your life, with apps that limit your use, that and just developing habits and routines and things like that. But a lot of that also comes from an internal awareness, and also the clarity of goals, knowing what you want, knowing how to get what you want, and going after something that isn't allowing the default stream of consciousness that the devices play to, but actually you being the one who uses the tool instead of the tool being the one that uses you.
Yeah, totally. I think something else I was gonna point out was artificial intelligence is, it's a thing, it's a real thing, and there's apps out there that utilize this, and the way some of these apps are developed with artificial intelligence, and the way they can almost destroy entire job sectors, just how they're being developed. Like for myself, like I do a lot of Photoshop or whatever, but there's apps that you can just go download that just eliminate any of the hassle that you're having to deal with. And it's been crazy to just kind of like see how it all comes together with, like, I mean, I'm sure you probably see some of the stuff on these phones that are dealing with like photo editing and all of that, and all these other programs
Even
are
coaching.
Yeah.
Coaching therapy. I mean, there's AI that is creeping into those spaces too. You know, I don't think that we have true artificial intelligence yet. I mean, it's machine learning and they are more sophisticated tools. I think we're a long way away. I mean, I don't think in our lifetimes we will see true AI, like sentient AI or anything that can replace human level of consciousness and creativity. It can definitely replace processes and simpler things that humans are used to doing, and it's going to be tough for the job market, and it's going to change society, that's for sure. But creativity and human cannot be replaced yet. You know, we're not there. We're a long way away from that. Even the therapy and the AI, the coaching and stuff where they ask you questions and they try to help you reflect, and you do exercises and things like that, it's still a very poor replacement for having another human that you interact with and you feel their presence, empathy, connection, pheromones, all of the things that happen when two people come together. So I think it's important. I mean, it's important to embrace the technology. It's not going anywhere, and we have to use it wisely. But I think it's interesting to see how creative people are using the tools to do things differently. And the innovation is what is going to keep us at the forefront. If you are trying to do something that a computer has already overtaken, then the value goes down. But that constant innovation and staying in front of it and using the tools in innovative ways, I don't think AI is going to replace that capability anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's kind of where just overall creativity is so important. I think that's kind of like why I wanted to get into this and shine more light on, into creative fields, what other people are doing, see what they're all doing, and just bring more light to it. And as you were mentioning, a lot of these processes, like minute tasks, are just getting replaced by AI to where, you can't compete with what AI is doing. But the one thing it's not done completely yet, from at least from what I've seen. You know, for all I know, there could be something developing that I'm totally unaware of. But overall, just trying to replicate creativity it's not quite there yet. You know, who knows, like maybe like 50, 100 years, you know, outside of hopefully our lifetime, uh, that'll happen. But just to see how important creativity is and just staying in front of it. And I think that was a really great point that you had brought up about just staying in front of it, because that's really what this is here for, to use as a tool. And I mean, we're at a point where, you know, our resources on this earth are finite. You know, eventually we're going to run out of things that we're going to need. So it's like we're having all this technology and actually putting it to use, I think, is where creativity is going to be so important with driving our market and, you know, allowing us to continue to survive. But I think just, you know, to be aware too of like what can happen with it. Like, you know, we have Facebook whistleblowers talking about how we're triggering our anger, and you know, we've got people on, you know, two different sides supposedly, you know, where people can't agree on certain things. And it's just I think just something that's important to keep in mind as we're dealing with this.
Yeah, and also, you know, to continue with what you're saying, the need for people to um, actively seek out other ideas, I think, is really important, because, you know, as we know, the algorithms validate our opinions that we already hold. You know, if you follow a particular keyword, like if you're following some political issue and, you know, you follow the hashtag, then they're just going to keep feeding you more and more and more and more of that, and potentially even radicalizing, because the more angry you get, the more you get hooked, and the more they make money, right? So the crazier you get, the better they are, the better off they are. Whereas if you actively seek out other ideas, you can balance out your own thoughts with new perspectives, and that is also very good for creativity. It's not good for making money if you're, you know, running the algorithm, but it's good for innovation. When you challenge your own notions, that's where you expand your mind. You know, what's creativity? You know, creativity is coming up with new ideas. How do you get new ideas? By thinking differently. What's, you know, what if we're looking at like, what's the definition of creativity? What's the definition of being a creative professional? It's your ability to connect dots that weren't there before. That's what people pay you for. There's the craft aspect as well. But it's really the human brain that is what's unique about that. So if you want to optimize that, you need to actively seek out things that you disagree with or that challenge your thinking. If you are, you know, even if we're talking about just aesthetics, if you have a particular style of working, but, you know, I do this thing with dried flowers and make these collages, and they're fun. You know, it's kind of just a hobby, a distraction, a way of doing something with my hands. But every once in a while I'm like, oh, I'm out of ideas. So I don't go and look at the same work that I've done 100 times and have people say, oh yeah, you should just keep doing the same thing. No, what I want to do is go and look at stuff that is going to trigger things in my mind that I hadn't thought of. You know, I can't just keep validating the same way of thinking over and over again, because that's not going to make me more creative. I have to disconnect. I have to go to a museum and look at paintings from, you know, something completely unrelated, irrelevant to me, to what I'm doing, and go, oh wow, how did they do that? And that's not something I had thought of before. Or even something controversial, you know, even art that I don't like, even things that that feel like contradict the point that I'm trying to make. And so technology and the culture that it's building around it is also dangerous for creativity, because it's about conforming. And being creative is about being a nonconformist. You have to be kind of a rebel to be effectively creative. You have to be a rebel in the way you think. And when you innovate, it means you do something different than what other people are doing. And I think there's a little bit of a challenge with the cancel culture, but I don't, that's like too narrow of a way of thinking about it. It's not cancel culture. It's just the nature of everybody trying to conform to different ideas based on whatever bubble you're in, and then saying, oh, everybody outside of that is wrong, because it's usually not true. You know, everybody has some notion that you can learn from. If you're, let's say, pro-life, abortion, you know, you I guess you're against abortion, let's say. So you have some ideas of what makes a person, you know, what is ethical, whatever. But if you are pro-choice, then you have ideas of what is beneficial for society, for women, what's fair, what's not fair. But both sides have something interesting to say. If you're like, these people are all crazy, and anything they say, I'm just going to shut off and think they're immoral monsters. Like, what chances do you have of learning something? None, you know. And that's usually how I feel about most issues. You know, anything you throw at me, I'm going to be like, okay, well, I have my opinions about stuff, like being pro-choice or whatever. But when it comes into when it turns into like slogans and wordplay, and then you get attached to like one phrase, something like women have the you know, my body, my choice, you know, these like hashtags, right?
Yeah.
And then you
Then
go and
you have people
you follow the
weaponizing it.
hashtag on the say that again.
I said, then you have people turning around and weaponizing these slogans against each other.
Weaponizing.
You know? Yeah.
And then you go online and you're like, oh, this is something I care about. This is when I'm an activist. I want to learn about this. So you go hashtag my body, my choice. And now you get 10 million videos and articles about my body, my choice. And you have all of the arguments in favor of my body, my choice, which I mean, you know, it is something I'm in favor of, right? But then you don't modify or adapt or improve or challenge that notion, because you're not hearing arguments from the other side. So there's less and less nuance in what you're saying. It just becomes this like monolithic idea of this is right, this is wrong. And that kind of dulls the brain. You know, it makes you dumb when you're seeing everything from this very narrow lens. You know, you got to change up the lens, and then you come up with new ideas, and then you can find a better solution, a better compromise, you know, and then you don't end up like Texas.
Yeah. I think you're like how you're bringing up just getting out and moving your body around, going to different museums and bringing in different ideas from different walks of life or wherever. Um, I think it was a really good point that you made, and I think it is really important to just switch things up. You know, your brain craves new ideas. You know, it wants to build these neurons and build out everything. And I think that's kind of why our cellular devices just become so addicting, because, you know, how else are you going to just go through so many different ideas, you know, at basically light speed, and then just you know, building up these ideas in your head. But I also liked how you're bringing up challenging your ideas and challenging these slogans, and it's almost like you can kind of tell, like, you know, when somebody's being more open-minded, you know, the level, I mean, at least from my perspective, like how I feel about things versus like if I'm stuck to this one idea, like only this idea works, like I can kind of notice like my whole mood is just, you know, not there. It's kind of in like a negative space versus like, hey, like I'm turning my brain to like taking this understanding, like, okay, this makes sense. Okay, I see why they're saying it like this, versus like, hey, my way of looking at it is correct. And then you can kind of notice you're not in a very terrific mood from it. So yeah, it's just really interesting to think about.
There is in the field of positive psychology, one of the big shots is Fredrickson, and has, this is something I learned in coaching school and then studying positive psychology after, and now it's become fairly well known that positive emotions expand your mind and negative emotions narrow your focus. So that's another sort of way of looking at what happens when you are stuck on one idea. It's more associated with stress. So the more stressed you are, the more angry you are, the more narrowly focused you are, these sort of negative emotions. And that's not to say that those are bad. I mean, negative emotions are important. We all need them for many, many reasons. But if what your goal is to, that's why goal focus is so important. If your goal is to come up with new ideas, increase divergent thinking, come up with, be innovative, then it's more important to prioritize seeking out positive emotions and expanding your purview, widening the lens. When you get fixated on a slogan, on an idea, on a method, on a philosophy, on anything, and you're just so hyper focused on this is the right way to do things, that's the antithesis, neurologically speaking, of thinking creatively. What you're doing is actually making yourself feel more you're sort of in this fight or flight, um, sympathetic nervous system activation type of thing, survival mode, and that's just not conducive to being more effectively creative. So I think all of these things are connected. The way that you use technology, the way that you prioritize your time, the way that you step away from what you're doing in order to expand your focus, go on a walk, meditate, run, take a shower, have sex, do whatever you got to do to get out of your own narrow way of thinking. Hey, radical idea, but if you believe in something, go and look up the opposite and see what the arguments are, not for the sake of shutting them down, but for the sake of like real curiosity. How do other people think about, we talked about abortion before. It's just, it's a hot button issue. So I'm using it as an example, but if you think, okay, my slogan is my body, my choice. What's their slogan? Okay, so then you start seeing their content. You go, oh, okay, so that's what their mentality. They're not bad people. Everybody has, they want to take care of each other. They have, if you're, then you start going, oh, well, what they really care about is like sanctifying life. Like that's kind of a beautiful idea. Okay, you don't have to agree with their methods, but then you start to have more nuance and more appreciation. And then you can go, oh, well, here's my perspective. What's your perspective? And then they might go, oh, wow, I never thought of that. And I never thought of that. And now you have, two tribes of people who are interacting with each other who walk away with new ideas. And of course, a sense of like belonging and compatibility as opposed to increasing those divisions. So I think creativity and going after creativity and sort of setting yourself up for your mind thinking that way is also a really positive like societal solution. If you're thinking in those terms, it's a higher function of the brain. It's not the more primitive survival mechanisms.
Totally. All right, Danny, I think we've done a good job of riffing. I think we got our hour in, and I agree. I mean, it's been a beautiful conversation to open up on these topics, and like you said, sharing ideas. Get exchanging ideas, walking away, thinking of ways of how we're expanding our brain, and just just crazy. Just trying to get this open up and making sure see how we're flowing in it. I love just, I could carry on this conversation for hours.
Yeah, same. Well, I really appreciate talking to you about it. It's always fun to riff on this stuff, and I feel like I've definitely learned something just from talking with you about it. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, totally. So, Danny, appreciate it. I see that you're on social media. So if people want to come follow you, where can they come check you out at?
Thanks. It's Full Frame Coaching.
Okay.
Fullframecoaching.com. Full Frame Coaching on Instagram. I think on TikTok, it's just my name. It's Danny Ghitis, Ghitis. So, if you use the Google, you'll find me.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so everybody make sure you're following Danny. It was a wonderful chat. Just like I said, this is a total rabbit hole where, you could go into so many different conversations and how it's relating to us, or, in all aspects in society. But like I said, it was great hearing from you. It was lovely to have you on the show. Appreciate your patience. I know we ran into some technical difficulties starting up, but yeah. I appreciate everybody who's tuned in to listen today. This has been like I said, an amazing episode. You guys can follow me at David J. Sherwin on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, wherever. Same thing. Use the Google. I appreciate you guys all listening, and hope you guys all have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. I'll have this whole recording done. I'll cut it. I'll have it posted today. It should be up. Yeah. So I woke up, had everything going. Like last night, everything was running perfectly on my cell phone. And like, cause that's how I actually record it, like is having
Shit happens, man. Don't worry about it.
So,
it's all good. It's all good.
My apologies on that, but it was great. Like I thought a conversation flowed well and it was enjoyable. I don't know. Is there any?
Yeah, it was fun. I hope it's useful to people who listen.
Definitely.
So would you mind if it makes sense for you to also like put the Full Frame Coaching, or at Full Frame Coaching or something like that? Because I didn't really mention at the beginning. I probably should have.
Yeah. I'll make sure I have that listed, and then we'll go from there. And then I'll have all your links in in all the descriptions where I post it up on YouTube, and then on my RSS feed where it feeds out the podcast. I'll make sure all your social links are up on there.
Appreciate that.
All right, Danny. All right. Appreciate your patience.
Nice talking to you.
Yeah, and it was nice hearing from you.
Yeah, let me know if anything else comes up.
All right, definitely. All right. Thanks, Danny. Have a good day. Bye.